that success wasn't sustainable for ever. But I honestly tried to keep my focus on the present and what was on my plate at that time. And yes, you'd hear Tom say certain things, this, that, and the other. Nothing is surprising when you play for the Patriots. You know, that's just how it goes.
Men in the Arena Episode 9 premieres next Tuesday. It features Tom's longtime go-to receiver,
Julie Edelman. All right.
That's right. Teddy and I will be back once more, joined by our special guest, Devin McCourty. Alongside Teddy Bruschi, I'm Field Yates. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to After the Arena, presented by Under Armour. I'm Victoria Arlen alongside Jason Fitz, Skubie Mageza. We just finished watching episode 8 of Man in the Arena, and we're here to break it all down with you. So guys, what did you think? First thoughts on tonight's episode of Man in the Arena.
It was, I think, Skubie, the darkest episode, right? Like, we keep trying to figure out where the turning point was. This was it. Like, I'll use my old man analogy, like Empire Strikes Back is the
I was
darkest.
going to say Empire Strikes Back,
like,
too.
If this is the Empire Strikes Back of the whole thing, and like the tone shifted. Even Tom now, when he talks about this season, has a different tone. All the players have a different tone, and I know we'll get into it, some specifics, but I thought this was really the tone. If you want to look back and say, where did everything fall apart for Brady, Bill, and the Patriots together? This was obviously the season that did it. They didn't say that, but everything they didn't say and the way they were acting about it, Skubie, that's what really hit me on this one.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the hammer right there, because this episode showed us the beginning of the rift between Brady and Bill Belichick, what began to kind of begin this snowball effect. And then at the end of the episode, Brady himself said, you know, I thought that things would not continue to go in the direction that it was going and I could come back and play through it. But if it continued to go in that direction, then I knew that things weren't going to work out. So I'm really interested to see what we can get from the next episode, but to see the beginning of this rift of how Brady separated and how big of a part Alex Guerrero played in Brady's life and his body was a sight to see, and really fulfilling in the sense of I want to take care of my body even more now.
I think about, Fitz, it's funny you said Empire Strikes Back. I was thinking of Revenge of the Sith, both wonderful Star Wars movies, but the moment where it kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, I'm a Star Wars nerd. I own it. It's fine. I'm wearing a collared shirt. It's fine. And he goes, you were the chosen one. And, basically like he crossed over to the dark side essentially. But who we're talking about, of course, is Tom Brady's trainer, Alex Guerrero, who quickly became a fixture in the Patriots locker room with both Brady and Gronkowski, crediting him with prolonging their careers in this episode. But controversy, as controversy does, started to churn around Guerrero and the TB12 methods that didn't align with the Patriots' more traditional way of doing things. So we begin to see the division brewing between Bill Belichick and Guerrero erupt when he stripped Guerrero's team privileges. Whoo! What did you guys think about players like Brady finding methods of training outside of their organizations?
Well, this was, Skubie, to me, one of the unique things about it, because Tom kept saying, hey, not everything is everybody's business. And he's right. Not everything is everybody's business. But I was looking at the stuff when it came to this particularly, saying Tom didn't want to answer those questions, didn't think it was anybody's business. But it was a real story that was impacting. Like when you've got your starting quarterback training in a little side closet and comfortable acknowledging it on camera at the time, like how weird all of that was, that's a rift. And just like we talk about any rift, it's not any of our business what they were fighting about on the Washington football team sideline on Sunday, but we're going to talk about it. Two guys go at it on the sideline. We talk about it like that. We look for every single thing that could possibly create a divide in a locker room. This was obviously a massive divide. So I get Tom coming in and saying, like, everybody thinks everything's everybody's business. But what it really comes down to is the guys that report on the team and women that report on the team every day have a job to report on everything that impacts the team, whether it's on the field or off the field. They tried to do that. This was obviously impacting the team.
Yeah, definitely. And it's because Brady and Alex's relationship is really special to him. I mean, to start this off, Brady called him his body coach. He said that they had a relationship that really went deeper than just player and trainer. And you think back to the beginning, because a lot of this episode is centered around Alex Guerrero, in my opinion, if you look at it from a distance, because they bring Gronk in, who also committed towards that TB12 method. And it started with Willie McGinnis introducing Alex to Brady and giving him the consciousness and awareness that there's a different way to take care of your body. What Alex does is bring in Western and traditional medicine together in one, and really understand that it's more so just about it's more so about physical, mental, and spiritual body, not just your physical. So their relationship also played a huge part in Brady's health, because things can go hand in hand with anything when you work together really well, when you have a great relationship together. And they had a great relationship together, and you work better with people who you have a better relationship with. I work great with you guys because I have a great relationship with you. Brady worked better with Alex instead of the trainers in the Patriots organization. And that's where this rift began.
Well, and at what point, is it Brady's choice? Like, he's not a robot. He is a human being who wants to maintain his health. But it's, I think, finding that balance between your job, but also like how you want to take care of your body. And I think up until now, we've always seen the Patriots locker room tight knit, maintaining an us versus them mentality. But in this episode, there is a cloud over the organization. A handful of times, Gronk alluded to a different feeling with this Patriots team, saying it was a, quote, long, eerie season where the energy was always off. What were some factors contributing to the wane of morale with the Patriots?
I mean, I think you got to look at the difference in tone to the way the team works. So this is something we talk about now all the time, right? Like, there are guys that said after Philly won the Super Bowl, I'd rather win one this way than win three the Patriots way, because the Patriots way is so strict and so dialed in. Now, I think that's conjecture. And most guys, if you really asked them, put truth serum in them, they just want to win championships, however they do it. But there are guys like Gronk that need to be a free spirit. And, I'll go back to my music days. Like, every gig is different in music. There's Martina McBride, famous country music singer. Martina is famous for her husband runs her sound. And they want every note from the record to be played exactly as it was on the record. So even though you didn't play on the record, if you played for Martina today, they want every single note to be played exactly the same way. So they want the CD replicated. And some guys are really good at that, but some guys hate it. They feel stifled on stage because you don't even get to be yourself. Then there's other gigs, like when I played for Phil Vassar for a long time. Phil's the guy that wouldn't even give you the record. He's like, just play whatever you want. Let's have fun. Let's be music, right? Like, let's be musicians. They're very different approaches to the same thing. And I think you got to remember that. And Scooby, this from dance, right? Like, there's a difference between improv and choreography, and there's a difference in the way it all runs, right? And so the Patriots are choreographed a very particular way, and it works for them. And it works for the people that are part of the Patriots organization. But what you could start to see was it was just wearing guys down, because for some personalities, it does over time kill the joy a little bit. That's what you saw, especially from Gronk. When you see it from Gronk, Gronk's the type of person that obviously needs positive juju to have the right version of himself. It's why we see Gronk being back now in Tampa. So I think it's just a personality rub when you're in the same system for a long time, Scooby.
Yeah, and you mentioned Gronk and his joy and his happiness. Alex also plays a huge part in Gronk's life. I loved some of the things that Alex had to say in this episode, and I wrote down in my notes Alex quote, because I would then reapply it towards my life. One thing he said, and this applied specifically towards Gronk, is when you can bring out, when you can play with joy, when you make it a joyful experience for him, then you'll get the best out of him. And this applies to all of us in life. Find something that brings joy out of you, because the best version of you will come out if you're joyful and you're playing freely without the emotions overtaking you where you're getting too high or too low. So having that joy was very important. And this cloud that loomed over them, for Gronk, I think it also was centered with that relationship with Brady and Alex, because those are his people. You got it. When you love somebody and they're going through pain, they're obviously venting to you, and you're like, damn, why you doing my guy like that? You know what I mean? Why you doing my boy like that? And that's definitely how Gronk felt. And then the media as well. We applied the pressure. And I think what they didn't like was how Alex was put in the spotlight. And how he was almost attacked.
False narrative.
Say. And it was like Brady took offense to that. And you saw him get visibly upset in one of the interviews where he was like, mind your effing business. And it was a moment of the episode where I was like, whoa, like you could feel that energy coming from Brady. He felt as if he had to protect his loved one. So I think that is it as well.
But here's what's weird about all that, y'all. Like, I think one of the things that the NFL culture creates, and this isn't about Brady, but this is about NFL culture. Like, if you don't stay with the team to work out, you go work out with your own trainers. Derrick Henry did it a couple of years ago. People covering the Titans were saying, well, we don't know what Derrick's doing. He's not in the building. If you get injured, the team medical facility, like the team doctors that they trust, are the ones that the team wants you to use. And everybody else from the team is going on that plot. So what do you do when your franchise quarterback turns around and says, no, that's not for me? And if you're an organization like shoes on the other foot, you're looking at it saying, well, I don't want everybody deciding that our medical facilities aren't right. I don't want everybody. So like, it's such a tricky situation. And you're totally right, Victoria, when you think like, hey, do what you need to do. But I also look at it and say, every time a player has been like, no, I'm going to get a second opinion from my own doctor on my ankle, my knee, my toe. I'm going to go train with my own guys in the offseason. I'm going to stay away from the team because I know what's best for my body. We destroy everybody that does that because we, in our collective mindset, have this like everything must be done as a team mindset. And Tom had that in some of the other episodes. So like when you see this version of Tom saying like, no, I'm now like, this isn't Tom trying to work his way in. This is Tom, the grown-ass man, Tom, the grown-ass superstar saying, I know what's right for my body. I'm going to do what's right for my body. So I see both sides of why this was really difficult. And it's like watching a couple that's arguing and you're sitting at the dining room table and you're like, hey, y'all, you're both right and you're both wrong.
Mom and dad are mad at each other. Like, what are you going to do when mom and dad are arguing? And you're like, wait, you're right. You're right. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like, that's exactly how I was picturing it, Scooby. It's like the.
You guys are describing every one of my holidays as a child. So
it's at what, there's not a perfect side. That's the thing. And it's like, has to be that fine line. And it is a tricky situation. It is a situation where you can see Brady was visibly upset with how the media treated him and the narratives, the false narratives, but it is a fine line because you also don't want everyone to be like, well, screw, my team and what they have to offer me. So it is that it's interesting. And I think there's no perfect formula clearly, but we also in this episode learn more about Brady's gruesome injury he sustained to his throwing hand during practice in the week leading up to the AFC title game against the Jaguars. Now, after a collision with running back Rex Burkhead, Brady luckily tore only the skin on his palm with no ligament damage, but somehow within 4 days, now everyone saw the photos, Brady ended up throwing for 290 yards, 2 touchdowns with no interceptions, leading the Pats back to the Super Bowl. How on earth does Brady return to play only days after sustaining that thumb injury?
Superhuman, right? Like there's some guys heal different, and we're seeing that right now this NFL season. Like Cam Akers coming back, the running back, tore his Achilles not long ago, and he's back on the field. Like some guys are just made different. But like y'all, what I kept thinking when I saw that was, think of how different the Jacksonville Jaguars legend would be, because they had one of those defenses that was supposed to be all time. And Blake Bortles had played well enough at quarterback that year that it was like, no, the Jags are for real. And they decided to run it back because they got that close to everything. Imagine how different we would look at that entire chapter of the Jacksonville Jaguars if Tom doesn't heal that. If Tom doesn't heal that way, the Jags go to the Super Bowl, and you have this incredible defense in the Super Bowl taking on Philly. I'm not sure the Jags weren't right then in that moment the better football team if you look specifically, particularly at the defensive side of the ball. So like Tom's superhuman ability to heal on that hand, Scooby, changes the NFL direction, not just it's like the tuck rule for the Raiders. Like if you're a Jags fan, you're sitting there saying, son of a biscuit, that damn thumb. Like it's amazing.
Yeah.
You think back to the beginning of the episode, what Alex said. He said, and like I said, I have a bunch of Alex quotes that I put down. He said, people think Tom Brady is a cyborg or something, or a superhuman, but really, no, he gets hurt and he gets cut up just like everybody else. But the difference is that he works really hard at it. And when Brady had this hand injury, I found it interesting how the trainer made sure to call Alex and let him know that something was done to him. So I was like, at that point, they're like, oh, crap, let's hit up his mans. Immediately, Alex was one of the first people to find out about this. But it goes back to why was he able to play? It goes back to his hard work. Brady's hand was being worked on around the clock. You saw some of the footage where they were massaging that little section of his hand and making sure the swelling is going down. And they gave a mix of the traditional and Western medicine as brought up in the beginning, and found ways that worked for Brady and with the team doctors, and found ways that worked for Brady with himself and Alex. Now, everybody else is different. I'm really into body health and taking care of yourself. And one thing I know for sure with some friends who are doctors and physical therapists is everybody's body is different. Everybody's body heals different. Everybody's body can take a different amount of pressure or force to whatever it is, or physical therapy, which is why we're about to maybe see Derrick Henry come back by the playoffs, which is ridiculous. And this is why Tom Brady was able to play in that game. It's because everybody's body is different. And if you know your body and how to push it right to where it's supposed to be to get that healing, then you're going to heal at a faster rate.
Well, and also a lifetime of work. Like, Scooby, let's be real. For guys like you that have been athletes, for both of you that have been athletes, like, you think about the way your body heals versus the way, somebody that hasn't taken care of themselves. Like, Tom had a whole lifetime of commitment into this. And one of the things that I think was really interesting, about Alex and Tom and the narratives around 40-year-old Tom is that the narratives weren't and aren't wrong. Like, that's the thing. We kept playing all the ESPN highlights of people saying he's going to hit that wall, he's going to hit a cliff. That's because that's what everybody does. Like, it's not wrong to look at somebody like, I've got that buddy. We all have that buddy that, like, the buddy's not in the best, like, financial situation. And I'm sitting there over the holidays and he's telling me how he spends $20 a week every week on the lottery. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, you're not going to win the lottery. And he's like, well, somebody does. All right, you're right. Somebody does win the lottery. Tom Brady won the lottery in this sense. Like, there's just a couple of them. But for most athletes, for every athlete up to that point that we've seen in modern football, 40 was something you didn't even think about. Like, late 30s. Like, when I was a kid, if your quarterback got to 33, they were done. Like, you weren't going to get anything reasonable after. And then it got to like 35. Now we've got an Aaron Rodgers that everybody's like, oh, will you give up first-round draft picks to trade for Aaron? Because we've seen Tom do it. But I think a lot of the conversation around Alex, and part of the reason people didn't believe it, is because you've never seen it before. And I'm not sure we'll see it regularly. So we have to actually look at this and say, combo. Tom may be genetically just one of those guys that heals really well. Alex may be great at what he does and finding that combination. And also, you bring all of this together, a little bit of sauce with a little bit of luck, you get what we have here. Like, I think it was fair to doubt all of it, and also fair to look back and say, hey, for all the doubt, he was right, they were right, and it worked.
It goes to everything of what you do to take care of yourself, from the food and the water that you drink. Victoria, you and I were talking about this when you're on Sports Nation. I was saying, if we had always drank natural water, there's chemicals in some water, there's chemicals in just about everything that we all eat. Now imagine if all of what you ate is natural and the way that it's supposed to be, the way that we're programmed to be on earth. I was like, that's why people in the Bible live to like 150, 70 years old, because all they had no high fructose corn syrup. They just had the regular stuff. So you got to think that's all that Tom Brady eats, and he takes care of his body with what he puts in. And Gronk even mentioned it at the beginning of the episode when he came up to Brady and said, hey, man, I'm sick of hurting. I want to feel like you. What do I have to do? He changed his diet. He changed everything that he did, and he became this star.
Well, it's treating
like you want to talk about getting rid of high fructose corn syrup out of everything in your diet, not a game. Like, it adds hours to your grocery. You're sitting there, you're like, why is it in the wheat bread? Somebody tell me why it's in the wheat bread. It's in everything.
Everything. Well, it's like, you hear the saying of your body's a temple. And I think Tom Brady took that to the extreme. And I think at first people were kind of like, what the heck is he talking about? But now people are kind of like, it's working.
Follow-up question then. If I eat like Tom Brady for the next 5 years, will I get drastically better looking every year? Because we can't deny that. I mean, I'm looking at the chiseling and I'm like, so which chapter of TB12 is going to make me look like Captain America? Because right now I'm a little bit more Clark Kent than Superman. So like, if there's a TB12 chapter that's going to get me into like the little tights and with the chiseled jaw, I'm taking it.
Yeah, bro, do it up.
I believe in you. I believe in you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we could talk about that this entire episode on our interpretation of all of that. We should. But we got to keep the train moving here. We got to land the plane eventually. And the Patriots were the returning champs in the Super Bowl, facing off against the Eagles, a rematch of 2005. And in his 8th Super Bowl, Brady felt they were playing catch up the whole time, and Gronk called it the most epic Super Bowl he's ever been a part of. Now, the Pats, as we all know, fell short, losing to the Eagles 41-33, their season ending on a missed Hail Mary play. Now, Brady says, tough season, tough game. We got to put that one to bed. What was Brady's trouble in this game, guys?
I mean, a couple of things. Philly played lights out, right? And that's Scubie's the fan. I watched the Philly team play inspired, and we talk all the time about the chip on team's shoulders. I think the lack of belief in Philly galvanized them. Also, certain locker rooms just have that extra little sprinkle of it factor. That year, Philly had it, and to see Nick Foles, who will forever be defined by his ability, not just the Philly special, but also his ability to come in and handle that moment. Like, how many times am I going to sit on radio and say, oh man, we know how Belichick plays against or coaches against backup quarterbacks. We know Belichick against young quarterbacks. We know Belichick against first-time starters. Like, none of that matters at all to Foles. Like, he was just a different level of calm, cool, and collected in this game. And I there was a different swagger with this Philly team because they sort of had this like we belong mentality. Skubie, I thought it played a huge part in that game.
Yeah, this it isn't more so about what was wrong with Brady. It was just more so what was right with Philly in that game because they played a great game. And Brady said that they were playing from behind. And when you play from behind with a team like that is really playing inspired, they had like LeGarrette Blount, I remember, was on that team. And that was the year after that the Patriots had let him go. And what the Patriots used to use LeGarrette Blount for, AKA blunt force trauma, let's put the game away. That's what he did on one of those final drives to the Patriots. And it was damaging in that game for one of the drives to close it out. But it also was on Brady himself with the mistake that he made when he had that sack fumble. That sack fumble gave the Eagles a chance. And the Eagles in this game, they just executed. Every single time they were supposed to execute, they executed. Third down, Nick Foles. It's like he used all talent that he has for the rest of his career on that one game. And now he's a third string quarterback for the Chicago Bears. So that's where he is. He left his talent, Super Bowl MVP. He'll always be called that. But it was more so about Brady's mistake on that fumble, the way that the Eagles continued to answer, and they just won the game.
I mean, Fitz, do you have
think about the fact that Peterson doesn't have a job. Nick Foles is the third string quarterback. Like, none of that was sustainable. It was magic in a bottle.
Real talk. What have they done ever since?
Yeah.
I'll wait for it. Okay. Crickets.
There we go.
Okay. Well, before we wrap this present up with those crickets, let's talk about our favorite part of the show, folks. Aside from that moment and Fitz becoming not Superman.
Clark Kent, Superman. I think it was our good buddy Mike Foss that told me one day that Alan Hahn within the company, check out Bart and Hahn, great radio show. He said, why does Alan Hahn look like Captain America and you look like the alter ego? So yeah, that's where we're going with this. So I'll say this. I don't know if this is my favorite moment. Like, favorite sounds different than I'll say this. I thought there was a really poignant moment from this. And it hit me because it was a play I talked about at the time. And it was a play that I thought the NFL got wrong. Gronkowski's unnecessary roughness, giving somebody a concussion, was one of the most inexcusable things I've seen on the field. And in modern football, with the attention to head trauma, I thought one game was soft, and I was hard on the radio at the time. I'm not going to be soft about it now because we've watched this. What really hit me, I was interested to see what Gronk had to say about that. And I've been hard on this documentary at times about not addressing some of the things that I think are important. Gronk addressed it in a way that was eye-opening to me. To walk into to sit in front of a camera and say, man, I was happy to get a week off. Like, my body was broken down. Like, it speaks to the fact that I think the suspension should have been much, much greater because it didn't create some sort of cause and effect that made him feel sorry for what he did. But more important to that, it speaks to how broken Gronk felt mentally, physically, emotionally. And it was a really eye-opening reminder for athletes at their peak that we see as the life of the party. Like, I partied with Gronk, and it's everything it's supposed to be. Like, he is a wild, wild man. To see him be so real about, like, I didn't want to play. I wanted the week off. To me, was a stunning reminder of how bad the culture had gotten. I don't know what it is now in New England, how draining it was for Gronk. And on a play that I'll always say the NFL should have suspended him for the rest of the year. They gave him one game. But to see Gronk come back from that and say, hey, man, I was so fried I needed the time off. I couldn't control my emotions. I thought that was a very real and human moment from this series.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly kind of that section is also like kind of my favorite part of this, because to see that whole section for Gronk was what tied Alex together and Gronk and Brady together in this documentary. And I thought that was it, Fitz. This week we have the same favorite part, how Gronk said he needed that time off and how his body was beat up. And then when you see his relationship with Alex take the next level, they said that whole week, Gronk spent the entire time with Alex. And this is where they brought the receipts on the TB12 method works. Alex said how they worked on his mental, his spiritual, and his physical. They addressed it that entire week. And Gronk went into that week basically depleted. He said he lost $330,000 and he didn't even give it. Dang, he was like, I'm just happy to get this week off and let my body recover. And then going into that game with the Steelers, he said he was telling everybody, man, I feel amazing. I'm about to go off. I'm about to go off. And we saw the highlights from the game. Gronk was going crazy. That was a fun game. And everybody that had Gronk on their fantasy football team, they'll probably always remember that game forever because he put up big numbers. It's got to be a kick
for Roger Goodell, though, to think like, I suspended him a game to punish him. And it was like, man, I needed it. I got right. Felt good. Came back fired up. You're like, son of a biscuit.
Yeah. Feeling good. And then
like, this is not how this works.
Exactly. And then to hear Gronk, after all that was said and done, when the season was over, they lost the Super Bowl. He was like, man, great season, but I'm just glad it's over. And that was a moment where you knew that they just scratched and clawed all the way to the end. And he was just tired of the Bill Belichick stopping him to go to Alex and the drama and his body being hurt. No wonder why he took a year off.
Well, and I think it's such a reminder to all of us, like, we're all fans here, but at the end of the day, like, athletes are human beings. They have feelings, they have emotions, they can get fried, they can be really tapped out. And so I think this was such a human side of, we've seen it this whole season with Brady, but then to see it with Gronk, and I think it's a reminder to all of us, like, yes, they're your fantasy team, yes, this is your team that you're cheering for, but these are human beings that are either tired, you don't know their mental health status, they could have everything going for them and have a lot going wrong in their head. And so I think that was such a reminder for us to have that human compassion and empathy to these human beings first and foremost, aside from being just these unbelievable athletes. And so I had that as my favorite as well. And then I that you guys mentioned, but I also feel like the quote that Brady said, where he said, people need the drama, people need the Real Housewives conversation. I think that struck all of us, where we're like, yeah, people do need the drama. People want to have that Real Housewives conversation, because, like, no one wants to sit there and be like, wow, they're doing a great job, mind, body, and soul healing here. People are like, what has he done? Is he separating? And I think that's where there is that, issue. And Brady's kind of like, people want the drama.
Yeah, but Victoria, let's be fair.